There has been an unexpected shift in the property market. Today, I'm going to outline what that shift is, why I expect it to get worse, and why so many people will be disappointed. So here we have the CoreLogic data for median property prices around Australia as at the 30th of September. And what you can see is that when you look at the median price change for all dwellings in the last 12 months, Sydney property prices are up 7.3%, Melbourne struggling but up 1.5% from this time last year, Brisbane 5.1% up, Adelaide prices are up 5%, Perth 8.8%. Now this is an astonishing result when you consider just 12 months ago we were seeing headlines like this. Secret RBA modelling shows 20% drop in house prices. Now, this was as of October last year. Property prices to fall by double digits in 2023, report warns. This from February of this year. Now, what really makes me angry about these headlines is that so many people would have been misled. So many people would have thought about getting into the property market either to buy their own home or to buy an investment property and then being scared off by these headlines. But it gets worse then when you look at actually what's happened to property prices since they reached their bottom. So here we have data again from CoreLogic, and what we can see is that how much have dwelling values risen since bottoming out? Well, Sydney property prices reached the bottom in January of this year, and since January up until the end of September, property prices have risen an astonishing 10.6%. In Melbourne, prices have risen 4.3%. In Brisbane, again since January of this year, prices have risen 9.1%. Adelaide market reached a bottom in March of this year. Prices have since risen 6.3%. Perth reached a bottom back in September of last year. Prices have risen 8.8% since then. Hobart, unfortunately, is still declining. The Darwin market, it reached a bottom in May of this year, has only risen slightly at 2.2%, and then ACT has only risen 0.9%. But then if we look at regional markets, we see a similar story. Regional New South Wales reached a bottom in January of this year. Prices have risen just 1.6%. Overall, regional New South Wales is still struggling. Of course, there are some exceptions though. Regional Victoria, prices are still declining, and I expect that's going to continue for some time yet. Regional Queensland though, since reaching a bottom in January of this year, property prices have risen 5.9%. Regional South Australia, since reaching a bottom back in April of last year, so that's now nearly 18 months ago, property prices have risen 13.2%. Regional Western Australia, again, reached a bottom in April of last year, prices have risen 8% since then. Regional Tasmania, prices are still declining. Regional Northern Territory, prices reached a bottom in October of last year, and then property prices have risen slightly by only 2.1%. Now here we're just looking at the general regional markets. Of course, certain regional areas have done much better than these statistics show, some have done a lot worse, but it shows you the trend, and the overall trend is that property prices have been rising in multiple areas around Australia since they reached their bottom either earlier this year or late last year. And we're seeing this data for areas that we're buying for clients all around Australia. For example, here's an area in regional Queensland where property prices have risen over 20%, and many of our clients have benefited from these sorts of capital gains. But in case you're skeptical about this data, maybe don't trust CoreLogic, let's have a look at this other data source. House prices at record high as property market rebounds. Experts have been left shocked by what is happening to house prices across Australia, and they have given a bleak warning. House prices are at new record highs, with the most rapid decline in values in recent history now fully reversed, and housing affordability now at its worst level in over 3 decades. Australia's housing market endured a challenging period in 2022 with successive interest rate hikes, rapidly decreasing borrowing capacity and limiting potential buyers in the market. But data from PropTrack's September House Price Index, so this is not CoreLogic anymore, this is looking at PropTrack, it shows that national prices have now recovered 2022's falls entirely. Prices are up 4.31% so far this year. All capital cities except Darwin saw price rises in September. Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth are the strongest markets and sitting at peak prices, with Sydney just 0.03% away from reaching pandemic heights. In Brisbane, home prices have already regained 2002's price falls and are rising at a fast pace, jumping 0.39% in September to hit a new price peak. The news is less promising for Melbourne. The country's second largest market is still sluggish to react to change conditions after bearing the brunt of the post-pandemic slump. Prices are still 4.27% below pandemic highs, with home prices rising 0.25% last month. But it is Hobart that is really lagging behind, sitting at 6.6% below peak levels. So what you can see is that although PropTrack's data does differ slightly from CoreLogic, the trend across both data sources is the same. Property prices are starting to rise, and we're starting to see more and more investors jump on board as they realize the property slump is well and truly over, prices are on the rise, and there are some great opportunities ahead. In fact, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, or ABS, released data showing the new loan commitments, and what you can see here is that investor loans, which is the bottom line, is actually on the increase. So are owner-occupied loans as well. But if we look at the uptick in investor loans, this has to raise a question. You've seen headlines like this talking about how more and more investors are actually selling out. So then how can more investors be selling out, but also more investors be taking new loans? What it shows is, once again, headlines like this are actually not giving you the whole picture. All we're seeing is that there's churn between investors. What that means is some investors are selling out and other investors are buying. But the key thing is that looking at new loan commitments, an increase in loan commitments by people buying their own homes, owner-occupiers, an increase in new loan commitments from investors shows that there's more demand in the property market, which is propping up property prices and driving them higher. And look, if you're hearing from people that this is a short-term trend, that property prices are of course going to fall because they're so expensive right now, the fall just hasn't happened yet, then you need to look at this next chart. This chart tracks dwelling completions, which is the blue line, versus population change. What you can see here is that the blue line, the number of properties that we're building, is actually on the decline. But population growth, the red line, as you can see, we're on a massive increase right now, and we're set to settle at record highs. That means that we're going to have a massive crisis, a bigger crisis than we have already in Australia, where we won't have enough properties for people to live in. That means that demand is going to stay higher than supply, and that means that property prices will continue to get more expensive. Property prices will continue to rise regardless of how expensive they are right now, regardless of the fact that housing affordability in Australia right now is the worst it's ever been, but it's actually going to get even worse. So if you're someone who's trying to work out, is now the time to buy an investment property? The data clearly shows that property prices are rising in multiple areas around Australia. So if you can buy an investment property, it certainly seems like the data indicates now is a great time to buy. Personally, although I think property prices are expensive, they're the cheapest they're ever going to be right now. I expect prices will keep rising across the country in many areas, and if interest rates do fall as I expect in 2024, you're going to see the rate of price growth increase substantially. And that's why, even though this isn't financial advice, I really believe that as soon as you can afford to buy an investment property, buying it as quickly as you can while still doing your due diligence is a really, really smart decision.